Hello there, and welcome back to my channel. This is one of my earliest digital paintings done way back in 2009. And here is how I would paint that same scene now. And in this video, I'm going to go over what I did wrong back then, and also explain what I did differently this time around. If you're new to my channel, my name is Jordan Grimmer, and I'm a concept artist working in the games industry. I'm using Photoshop to create this, and if you'd like to learn more about creating landscapes, be sure to check out my other tutorial videos. Before I jump into what I'm changing and why about this old picture or scene or something like that, whatever we're going to call it, it's probably best to go over my thought process when I was making this scene originally. So when I started digital painting back in 2009, I was a complete beginner, as you can probably tell. And I found Photoshop, I found using a tablet, I found like all the basic normal concepts of doing art really confusing. I had no idea what I was doing. It took me hours to get to what I had there at the very beginning, what you just saw there, because I was just really mashing buttons and hoping something would happen instead of having a goal in mind. And I think the only goal I guess I probably did have when I was making that picture beforehand, if I can remember correctly, because this was ages ago now, I wanted to make a lake scene that was surrounded by a forest. I wanted to have a figure looking over it, and I wanted the whole thing to look lush and colourful, and that's kind of what I had in my head anyway. You know, that digital art around 2009 was all very much like, you know, put a little figure at the front of something, and well, I guess digital art is still like that really, isn't it? So anyway, I think it's quite clear that the most obvious problem with this old scene is the kind of extreme use of black and white. The values are not necessarily all over the place, there's just two values to this, isn't there? And there's just no structure to the scene apart from a huge white splodge and a huge black splodge, with no detail apart from a few custom brushes here and there, and that's really the only kind of like detail that I really tried to put into it. And I clearly just didn't do this with this one picture as well. I did very similar things with a lot of the other scenes I was making at the time too, that you can see here. And I think this kind of happened because I was just too scared, or I didn't really know how to actually paint in what I wanted or actually convey what I had in my head. I didn't really have a clear reference in mind for how I wanted these areas to look, and I didn't understand what colours I should use. I didn't understand anything about just, you know, building form or anything like that really. And I remember it took me ages just to get to grips with the idea of just, you know, actually painting something in Photoshop, you know, and like that really, that leads me to my second big problem, as you can see in these images, where I just had a massive overuse of custom and like stamp like brushes. And back then I think I remember seeing like a lot of these around much more than now really, and I just wanted a shortcut. I wanted to quickly get to a finished painting, if you can call it that, by using these custom brushes that just were in the shape of like, you know, trees and buildings, just to speed things up really. And I don't think this is particularly bad, and obviously custom brushes definitely have a place in digital painting workflows, but the way I was using them here was just a way for me to get something down quickly without really knowing what I was doing really. It took me a really long time to stop using these kind of custom brushes all the time. There was just so many brush packs on DeviantArt back in 2009, and you know, I just kind of just downloaded a lot of them and just thought maybe I'll just do that instead of actually like drawing anything down. And that over-reliance on things like that really did set me back for like years really. You know, while I was at university, I should have been learning how to draw and paint more, but instead I was using these stampy custom brushes really. It was weird. And I think this comes down to just being really scared about not knowing how to really draw or paint. So hopefully it's pretty clear what I needed to do to fix this old scene. And I think, like, obviously shock horror, it's actually to make it look like what I originally intended it to. And again, that was meant to be a green lake or something like that. So let's actually kind of get into what I've actually done. When I start paintings now, I always try to have an idea of how I want the composition to look in the finished product. And I want to see really where all the big shapes are going to sit. And to fix this scene, I wanted to do something like this. Breaking landscapes into simplistic shapes like this was the first thing that really clicked with me when I decided to properly learn how to paint. When people first start trying to draw, most of the time, like, people tend to try to include every little detail of a very small part of an image, instead of taking in and looking at the image as a whole. And one of the most important things I've learned is to simplify forms down and to ignore any tiny details. You can get to the tiny details later on, but in the beginning it's all about breaking down like a landscape into its simple shapes, so then we can really easily create compositions without all the distraction of the unnecessary details. This is what I had in mind when I was painting the scene again, and it's what I'll stick to throughout the video. So you hopefully saw earlier that I started by immediately painting and pushing back these completely black values and creating an area so we can put something new there instead. And also I've started the process of building these new shapes into the landscape by using the lasso tool to mark out my first area of shoreline, and this is where I'm also going to try to make the focal point of the image as well. I'm not doing this first because it's the focal point, it's just how I started this paint over. I wanted to straight away actually get something in there, like get some form in there, just to make it look like a lake instead of just a blank white space as it is as it was earlier. You'll hopefully notice again that I'm not zooming in at this stage either, like I'm keeping the whole image in front of me to avoid getting distracted again by those small details. Right now it's all about just getting these big shapes in and creating the foundation of the image and getting the composition just to hopefully sit right. Whenever I'm doing a paint over like this, or I'm starting a landscape from scratch, I try to just stick to using like a very graphic and a very loose kind of look when it comes to building form like into the shapes that I've already put down. So what I mean by that is, like, you know, I've put down a shape, but then I start painting into that shape with a different value. So yeah, I'll put a block color down, then using another kind of color just to kind of like then hint at the form of the landmass. It's all about just trying to very simply show the lay of the land in a way, without really kind of like trying to paint every little bit of grass or anything like that, you know, but just trying to show where the light is hitting the land. I'm also trying to inject more colour into it too, instead of just sticking to the monochromatic green palette. Can we even call it a palette really? But here we are. I get also asked a lot about how I choose my colours when I'm starting to build into the shapes that I've put down. And with this paint over, I wanted to make it much more vibrant and colourful. So I started by putting down some much kind of like cooler tones, like blues and stuff like that, into the background, and then warmer tones onto like that shoreline area that I kind of masked out at the very beginning. I'm always trying to think about like the warm and the cool balance when it comes to using colour, and to be honest, I kind of overly rely on putting hard blues into my shadows and stuff like that, because for one, I think it adds a really nice contrast, and two, because I always wrongly assume that the sky in my paintings is blue when it's probably not always the case. The colour of shadowy areas can be dictated by a number of different factors, and that doesn't always mean that they'll be always cool in tone either. The best way to really learn about colours is to always just look at reference and stuff, be it photo reference or other artists' work, or something else that has a look or feel to it that you're drawn to. The way I always choose my colours is always based on all the media and all the stuff that I've ingested over the years, and all the other artwork that I've seen on ArtStation that I love. You know, other colour schemes that I think look really cool. And it's only really once you start really experimenting and playing with colour yourself and seeing how you can build your own palettes up that you start to realise your own style when it comes to colour, and also how to choose what colours to use. I know it sounds like really boring to just continually say, you know, you've got to just do studies and work at it, but I think colour is really one of those things that you really do need to do that with, because it's all about building a visual library in your head. One of the quotes that I think I've mentioned in my previous videos that has always stuck with me, that and has also really kind of helped me to kind of figure out when my colours maybe aren't working, is from James Gurney. And he also has, I've said before as well, but like he has an amazing book called Colour and Light that really helped me to understand a few kind of like principles when it comes to colour. But I think I read this on his blog at some point, but he says that if you find that your colours are quite muddy, they're quite, you know, they're looking very plain, that nothing, it just something doesn't really look like it's working, it's usually because it doesn't have like the opposite temperature, like tone within that colour. So say if you've got like a brown or something like that and it's looking very muddy, for example, if you really wanted that to kind of make it look more vibrant, you should try to add like elements of blue, or like kind of the elements of colour that's on the opposite side of the not always on the opposite side of the colour wheel, but just cooler tones. You know, if it's a cool colour that's not looking very good, put some warm tones into it, and vice versa. And that's always stuck with me, and that's always been something that I've tried to integrate into all my paintings. But to be honest, you can probably just ignore everything I just said there, because for this picture, I'm not really kind of going for a very realistic colour palette anyway. I'm definitely trying to kind of go for a bit more of a cartoony picture book look. So obviously the colours I'm still trying to use are still referenced and referencing real life, but the kind of style that I feel like I'm kind of doing a lot more recently is definitely more down this kind of more stylized route, because I'm not, and I don't really know why really, and I guess that kind of goes back into kind of one of the reasons I'm changing it from the original picture now, because yeah, I feel like I've just really been drawn to this style since I did this old picture back since 2009. Like I think my style kind of like painting and stuff has really gone through a very weird set of changes. Like I first started, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, using custom brushes all the time and not really doing anything, well, you know, drawing wise really. And then I got into the phase of overly relying on photo textures and just slamming stuff together and thinking that was what creating concept art was all about, but you know, without really kind of adding any of my own flair to them. And then I guess I kind of just slowly understood more about how to make environments and stuff like that. So and now I guess in the last like 4 years I've really tried to focus on just painting instead of trying to rely on maybe kind of using some photo textures here and there. Nothing wrong with that, obviously, but yeah, it's weird. It's funny how like the way that you look at art can change, and like it's now been 14 years since I did this picture, and you know, I guess some people might say that, oh well, you haven't really it's not that much of an improvement, but you know, I think doing something in a few hours compared to that now is, I don't know, I'm quite proud of myself in a way. So anyway, I think I got a little bit sidetracked there. I'm sorry. So, an artist that I really like recommend looking into, who uses color like amazingly well, is Nathan Folks. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I'll put a link on the screen now. Like his use of color is just something I really aspire to, and obviously I'm like way off yet, but maybe someday I'll hopefully be able to get to his level. So yeah. The video has played through quite a few bits now, and you can see that I've finally started blocking in some more elements to make the scene look a little bit more like a a forest lake, you know, more like, you know, like kind of what I originally planned out. So I've blocked in trees, and I've pushed the scene back more by blocking in a mountain in the distance as well. To do the trees and the foreground shapes, I've only really focused on creating like the silhouette of them first. Like when I block in the landscape shapes in the beginning, and then I like paint into those shapes, I'm doing the same thing with the trees and with the other foliage too. By getting in the shape of the object first, it then makes painting the rest of it much easier. If you can get the silhouette of a shape looking somewhat like what it's meant to resemble, you know, what is it meant to look like, just on a silhouette kind of basis, you can then focus on getting the details into that shape without having to worry about like kind of anything else about it. Well, apart from like the colour later on and stuff like that. But yeah, setting the silhouette down first really makes it easier to then build form into that shape. I use this technique when painting most things, to be honest. Getting the silhouette of something down first is really key to making things readable, and I've said that a lot in my other videos too, where, you know, the key thing I think with landscapes, and especially when you're trying to get the composition down and the idea of it down, is that it has to really be readable to the viewer easily. And this applies to character design, you know, it applies to kind of a lot of facets in art, and it even applies to these silly little trees that I've done in this video. It was actually this technique of blocking out and working with shape that helped me the most when I really started learning how to paint. For me, for some reason, the idea of sketching things out in line work always gave me a huge headache. I could never really understand why, I just really couldn't click with it, really. And I'm very much the same now, really. I would get really angry, I'd get very agitated, and I would just give up, which is why I try to find shortcuts, like I mentioned earlier, with like custom brushes and overly photo bashing stuff. And I think one of the things I didn't actually mention as well that I've done quite a lot is that in the most recent years I also been overly reliant on custom shapes, which is another tool in Photoshop that you can use. And again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I feel like I was relying on them too much, you know. And I think when you over rely on a tool, knowing that you're kind of just trying to circumvent like another possible route to a finished product, you kind of know that maybe you shouldn't really kind of be doing or using them so much. But that is just me, so, you know, don't take that as a gospel. I think everyone approaches art in a different way, and my brain just tends to see landscapes by thinking of like the shapes that make up the scene rather than kind of putting down an outline of them, and that's very similar with like everything else I do in art. I remember when I did this scene originally, you know, the very original one, I was so caught up in drawing stuff in line work, and then when I would fail, I would just leave a big empty space like you can see in the original image, when instead I should have just tried to change the way I see the process entirely. I also didn't mean for this video to be so self-reflective, but I guess that is kind of the point of this whole exercise, isn't it? So yeah, just to cap off that little ramble, essentially, you know, I find line work very difficult, and the reason that I block things out and I do that process, or this process now, is because my brain just kind of works that way. In addition to that, one of the best things I've learned since I made this old scene is the importance of really using broad strokes, and that could be when I'm blocking out a scene, or when I'm trying to put like an extra level of lighting into the scene as well, or, you know, just generally when I'm painting now, I try to just make sure my brush strokes are broad and they cover a wide area, just so I can get and avoid to kind of like going down that route of like making a lot of very detailed choices and keeping the foundation of the image like really front and center. It's really easy to fall into the trap of spending hours rendering a section of a painting, and obviously there's nothing wrong with that, and the whole rendering process can be really therapeutic and calming, like painting in general, but only when it's obviously going well, and when it's not, it's awful. But if you're looking to create a painting that like works overall, it's really important to like not overly work up small sections just because you're either like afraid to tackle something else in the painting, like you're distracting yourself, or because you think detailing one small thing will impress like the viewer or something like that. And you're doing all this kind of stuff while the rest of the painting isn't really working. Using broader strokes while zoomed out from a painting really helps you see, again, the foundation of how the painting is all working, and this might mean that you have to paint over things that you spent hours rendering. And unfortunately, you've got to give up that part of the painting to make the whole of it work better. So many younger artists that I talk to are afraid to get rid of or, change parts of their work because they are feeling a bit too like precious about it. But unfortunately, in the concept art world, like just because you've spent hours on something, it doesn't mean that it can't be changed. And this happens, every day in my job. Just because you've spent a long time on something, it doesn't mean it's a valuable piece of artwork. It's more impressive when, everything is working together instead of one small section of a piece of art. And by using broad strokes, that is one very, I think, very good way of making sure that you're keeping the whole image together, and you're really not allowing yourself to go down those routes of just looking at very detailed little sections, and instead thinking of like the whole thing. So I'm trying to, well, now that I've actually made another video after 8 months, this is a horrible edit, but it was actually 10 months, not 8 months. I'm trying to kind of think about ways that I can make these videos like a little bit more interesting, and like I'll be completely honest, like I'm trying to be a bit more entertaining and hopefully make this channel just a little bit more carefree and a bit more fun in a way, maybe. So I guess I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do that, but what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to kind of do a lot of different topics. I'm going to try a lot of different challenges, and yeah, I'm just going to try to just be more on here because this year has been crazy for me. It's been very busy. Work has been good. My personal life has been good, but I haven't really been focusing on art enough. And I think doing tasks like this, it's really good to kind of bring me back and kind of center me a little bit. So yeah, I'm also keen to hear any video ideas that you might have, and also like if you've ever got any comments or questions about anything that I do in these videos, just please put them in the comment section and I will try to get back to you, obviously. So yeah, I think I probably talked enough now. I think it's probably time that we kind of look over what I've actually fixed in this image. He says that he's talked enough, and then actually he's going to talk some more, so yeah. So what have I actually learned from doing and redoing this old picture from 2009? So I think the main thing is that when I look at the original one and I look at how I've painted over this now, I think the way that I fixed it is by using simple shapes and simplifying things down and sticking to that idea of simplification, taking away all the messy custom brushes, all the noise that the original piece had, and trying to make some basic shapes to build the actual landscape. I've also fixed the values as well. I've made sure we've got rid of that horrible black and white thing that I was doing back then. I still don't know what that was about. And I've injected more colour into it. And I think the main thing for me, the main thing I fixed for this, and the main reason I wanted to repaint this, is the fact that I've expanded like the scene and expanded the world in the scene a bit more. I feel like this is a really fun task for me to do, because going back and remembering what I had in my mind for this image, it's really nice to kind of like now be able to actually fully envision that. That's a really douchey thing to say, but yeah, you know what I mean. So yeah. So yeah, so very simple changes, I think. Really, I don't really think I've gone overboard. Really, I feel like I've also hopefully somewhat retained the look of the original image. I feel like I probably haven't retained a lot of the mood from the original image, which is a shame, but I'm still quite happy with the finished result, so yeah. And I've got a massive headache, so I'm going to stop talking now. Yeah, I really hope that you've enjoyed this. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos now, and if I don't, you can shout at me. I'm really going to try my best to. This has been really fun to make, so I'm going to do some more of these in the future. And I think I'm going to do a video coming up soon where I'm going to look over all of my old artwork through DeviantArt, and I'm just going to rip it to shreds, and we'll see what comes up, and I think it will be quite fun. So yeah, I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you later.